The show Batman Beyond was very mature in some of its themes, and very dark in places with truly horrifying transformations and scenes, such as seeing what happens to Bane in the future. After a lifetime of abusing the Venom drug, his body is all used up, and we see the darker side of steroid abuse, or rather the reality of steroid abuse. There have also been a number of transformations that are purely about horror and fear, meant to scare and entertain the audience, and we are going to go over the 5 most truly terrifying ones. Ink's Lacky. Now we're going to start with one of the worst transformations, and it's actually a rather sad story. Now, Batman has previously captured the supervillain Ink, and had to use Mr. Freeze's gun in order to subdue her. And so the police have had to keep her locked in a block of ice as a prison cell because they have no other way of containing her. Now, the man in charge of her care is rather lonely, and he romanticizes a relationship between himself and Ink, which leads to him actually getting fired. And he decides to get his payback by tampering with the coolant system so that Ink's ice prison melts and she is free. Ink then takes advantage of him, both by using his home as a place to lie low, and then using his help to get the chemicals that she needs to fix her body, as being frozen for so long has damaged it. The reason she knows who he is, by the way, is because even though she was frozen, she could still hear everything that he was saying, and he was constantly talking to her all day long about his life. Now, she offers him a reward for his services, and he asks for the most obvious choice. He wants the same powers as her. I mean, who wouldn't want them? So she injects him with the same chemicals she injected herself with, but it goes wrong. Instead of awesome shape-shifting powers, his body melts into a disgusting freak who can barely stand and can't even talk. And he ends up in the same prison cell that Ink was once in. Admittedly, he's not frozen, but that's not really much of an advantage when you can't really move around. And the worst part about this is, he's not even really a supervillain. He's just a sap who was taken advantage of. And as for Ink herself, she needs more chemicals to keep her powers going, and later on in the series, she gets desperate enough to contact her estranged daughter, whom she has never met and is actually addicted to spending money. And the daughter decides to kill her mother in order to steal her fortune, by injecting her with a corrosive agent instead of the chemicals she needed in order to survive, and so Ink dissolves into nothing, although it is hinted at that she might still be alive. Splicers. In one episode of Batman Beyond, there is a new fad of splicing human DNA with animal DNA to give humans animal attributes. Now, this isn't all that surprising, as humans have always been obsessed with being part animal since the dawn of time. It's why the Egyptian gods were hybrids, and why the lords and kings of old had animals as the sigils for their houses. So it makes sense that when technology has advanced far enough, we would splice our DNA with animals. And in the future, it's essentially the same as getting a tattoo or a piercing.
Splicing is safe, reversible, and more importantly, utterly beautiful.
It's just a way of making your body more artistic and to custom it to a person's personal tastes, along with enhanced senses and increased strength. After all, there's a lot of really good powers in the animal kingdom that we would all love to have. The problem is when you take things too far, as the man in charge does. He is secretly heading up some criminal actions, and when Batman goes to shut him down, he actually injects Batman with a serum that mutates him into a man-bat creature. He can't even think like a human anymore, he's basically just a wild animal. Though fortunately, Bruce Wayne has developed a cure for this splicing and is able to return him to normal. But the worst part of all this is when Batman goes back, and the bad guy keeps taking more and more DNA to increase his fighting ability, and turns into a sort of Snake Man hybrid so he can take Batman down. And so Batman decides to give him what he wants, and he injects him with every type of DNA around him, mutating him into a sort of Leviathan H.P. Lovecraft-like monster, a creature that no human would ever willingly want to become. And he almost kills Batman with his newfound strength, but fortunately Ace saves him, like the good boy he is, and buys Batman the time to take the creature out, and it ends up with the building burning down, killing it. Which, to be quite frank, is probably a good thing. I mean, I don't know if they can return him to normal, but the way he was, he is definitely better off dead. Big Time. An old friend of Terry McGinnis is released from juvie and gets in touch. He's a friend from Terry's bad boy days before he donned the Batsuit. Back when he was called Tiny Terry, and his friend was called Big Time, because he was always going to make it big. But it turns out he only gets in contact because he knows Terry can get him a job at Wayne Tech, which of course he does, and Big Time then intends to steal some valuable chemicals. Now Batman works out that he's been manipulated, and when he turns up to stop them, he tries to let them walk away unharmed because he doesn't want to take out his friend. But of course they fight back, and Big Time is exposed to the chemicals and mutates into a deformed yet super strong creature, whom is hideous to look at. He's basically a walking freak show. The chemicals he was exposed to are all about growth hormones, so his muscles and cells have grown in weird freakish ways depending on how many chemicals he got on them. But on the plus side, Big Time actually likes being like this, believe it or not, as he loves that people are instantly intimidated and scared of him when they see him.
I like the way I look. The minute I walk into a room, I get respect.
Now that's a bit odd if you ask me, but I guess having insane strength would probably give you a pretty much permanent adrenaline rush, and add to that a gangster's mindset is all about respect and fear, well, it does kind of make sense. And as the series goes on, he manipulates his friend Terry once more, and therefore manipulates Batman, and he gets rid of his competition on the streets, and he becomes top dog of his own crime ring. So even though he looks horrifying, he's made the most of it, and finally hit the big time. Or at least his idea of the big time.
I'm sorry. I know how hard it is to go against a friend.
I outgrew him, that's all.
The Earth Mover. A lot of powers in comics comes from accidents and radioactive waste, and one guy gets chemicals spilled all over him by accident while illegally dumping this radioactive material, and he's believed to be dead. And quite frankly, he might as well be, as the chemicals turn him into a paralysed corpse, barely alive but able to control the Earth, and he makes these golems out of the Earth and is able to kidnap his daughter, at least until Batman Beyond cuts off the chemicals that were keeping him alive and kills him in the process, as it was the only way to save the hostages that the Earth Mover had abducted. Still, his body is truly mortifying to look at, and it looks incredibly painful. The Terrific Trio. Now this story is essentially a reimagining of the Fantastic Four, except there are 3 of them. One turns flat and becomes a stretchy 2D man, one turns into a sort of ice ghost, and the other becomes a walking lava rock monster, feared by children and not even able to hold the hand of the woman he loves. Now true, each of them does get amazing powers. There's super strength and lava, there's stretchy powers, and of course the Ice Lady has the ability to shoot ice and can fly. But they look like freaks permanently. Admittedly the lava monster has it the worst though, but they're never really going to have a decent healthy relationship with people in this state. And worse still, the accident that caused their bodies to mutate isn't finished, and it's not only going to continue mutating till it kills them, but it's going to drive them insane first. And then worse still again, they learn that they were betrayed. As I said, there were only 3 of them, but it was actually meant to be a 4th scientist in the room when the accident happened. But he wasn't there because he caused the accident to happen. He had meant to get the 2 men so that he could have the woman to himself, as petty as that sounds. Basically, he was in love with the woman loved another man, so he thought he would turn that man into a freak and then he'd have a chance with her, which is insanely stupid and insanely messed up and of course did not work. Especially since she was caught in the accident. So not only has he lost the girl, but he's killed his 2 best friends for no reason. So it's a sad ending for all, including Batman, who has to take all of them out and seemingly kills them all. Blight. In Batman Beyond's first mission to get revenge for the death of his father, he kills the man who killed his father. And he also exposes the man who gave the order to a deadly virus, the only cure of which is radiation, which mutates with the virus and turns Derek Powers into a radioactive monster. Now he does make the most of it and goes by the name Blight, and he does get some cool powers, such as never being cold and being able to blast radiation. But he is still a walking nuclear reactor, so he's essentially giving cancer to everyone around him constantly, though he is able to conceal and contain the radiation inside of a fake human skin suit. The perks of being a billionaire, I guess. Unfortunately, the levels of radiation his body produces continue to grow until they just wear straight through the skin. And the radiation grows further still, especially because he keeps getting angry and it grows with his temper, until it reaches a point of critical mass, and he explodes, sinking a nuclear sub in the process. And he also presumably dies since we don't see him again in the show, but Batman does tease that he's still alive. And those are the most horrifying transformations in this show. Personally, I think the ink one is the saddest and the most terrifying one, but what do you think? Which one of these is the worst in your opinion? And are there any other horrifying transformations that you think should have been mentioned? Be sure to let us know in the comments, and I'd just like to quickly remind everyone that we have some merchandise available on our store, and to say thanks to all of you who have donated to the Needle Mouse Productions page on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, share, like, and comment.